The Pope was a very humble, very simple man, very charismatic, very sweet.
Pat my shoulder and he said, "Bravo, bravo, keep doing what you do, my child." And he smiled.
I'm going back to Toronto, tell my son some of the things I've seen
Meet
here.
Pope Francis is an aura, is something special.
That signal what Pope Francis wanted here, a simplicity and accessibility to the faithful. The square already filling with mourners this morning. Leaders from around the world are here in Rome to pay tribute to Pope Francis. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, along with other world leaders, including Ukraine's President Zelensky, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Prince William, all here for today's funeral. Pope Francis was born Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Argentina, the son of Italian immigrants. He studied science to be a chemist. He loved music and dance. He loved soccer back in his home of Argentina. He would become a priest at 32 years old, a modest servant who rose to become known as the People's Pope. We have our team in place across St. Peter's Square, along the procession route, and at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, where Pope Francis asked to be laid to rest. It was just a few hours ago the world took its final look at Pope Francis. We were here following 3 days of lying in state here at St. Peter's Basilica. And in a dramatic and moving ritual, the Pope's face was covered by a white silk veil. His coffin was closed. A bag was placed inside containing coins minted during his papacy and a canister with a rogito or a deed listing details of his life and of his papacy. We have seen a constant flow here of mourners since news first broke of his passing nearly 1 week ago, early Monday morning. After his moving appearance on Easter Sunday, more than 250,000 people came from all over the world, waiting for hours in slow-moving lines here at the Vatican. There were tears. We saw people praying, weaving their way through the square for their chance to say goodbye to the man who led the church for 13 years. Even in death, Pope Francis wanted to be accessible to the people he served. His wooden casket placed in front of the main altar instead of a raised pedestal so he could be properly seen on the same level as the faithful. Following the Mass, a procession will take Pope Francis from St. Peter's Square right here to the Basilica of St. Mary Major. The Pope had requested he be placed there. He'll be closer to the people there too as well, right in the heart of Rome. And we have just learned this morning that the Pope's hearse will be a converted Pope-mobile. The Vatican says he wanted his tomb to be undecorated with a one-word inscription, Franciscus, of course, his name in Latin. The Church also revealing the Pope's will. He called for his tomb to be, quote, in the earth, simple, without particular decoration. The Vatican revealing an image of the tomb's design, Italian marble from Liguria, where his grandparents were from, right here in Italy. Of course, that was one of the Pope's requests as well. And then following the funeral here, of course, the College of Cardinals, up to 135 eligible cardinals from all over the world, will convene the secret conclave to begin the process of electing a new pope. It's a ritual that could take days. We still do not know officially when the conclave starts. The cardinals will remain behind closed doors once it does start, though, until they select a successor. They'll vote up to 4 times per day, twice in the morning, twice in the evening. Of course, black smoke from the Sistine Chapel signals no one received the 2/3 of the votes needed. White smoke, of course, signals a new pope has been chosen. It was just last weekend, though, 1 week ago, the world witnessed that remarkable moment. Pope Francis taking what would be his last ride in the Pope-mobile through St. Peter's Square on Easter Sunday during the holiest week of the year. He was still recovering from double pneumonia and 38 days in the hospital. The Pope hesitated before his surprise appearance and asked his personal nurse, "Do you think I can manage this? Can I manage it?" When it was over, he told his nurse his final words, "Thank you for bringing me back to the square." It was an extraordinary moment, and it is hard to believe, given how much we have seen and witnessed here this week, that this was just 1 week ago. I want to bring in our chief international correspondent, James Longman, who was here all week covering this for us at ABC News. And James, that final appearance on Easter Sunday, a bit of a surprise appearance to come out on the balcony and then to travel through the square in the Pope-mobile, the People's Pope right until the end.
Absolutely, David. It was very emotional, really, to find out that for the Pope, he didn't think he could do it until his private nurse, Massimiliano Strappetti, said to him, I think you can go out there. He gave him the reassurance he needed, and to know it meant so much to him, was, truly moving to the thousands of people who are appearing now in the Vatican to say goodbye to him. Tutti, tutti, tutti. He used to love to say that. Everybody, everybody, everybody. And look, David, behind me, at everybody appearing. I mean, people are coming from all four corners of the earth to say goodbye to this Pope. He used to like to bring people together, and boy, have they come together to say goodbye to him. I have to say, seeing a lot of young people here. It's extraordinary. Look, so many teenagers in the crowd. This year is the year of the Jubilee of Hope that Pope Francis called for. This weekend, the Jubilee of the Teenagers, and they were going to canonize the first millennial saint, a young man who sadly died of leukemia at 15, but his faith was so important to him that we're going to canonize him here in the Vatican, and that is why so many teenagers were here. That service obviously postponed, but as a result, these young people have found themselves in the middle of history, and they are so excited to be here. They're all waving up to our platform here. I can see flags, banners and the like. So yes, a somber moment. Yes, serious. We are burying a pope today, but also a celebration of a man who really meant so much to so many people around the world. And yes, David, you mentioned that last moment when he drove around St. Peter's Square. It really did move a lot of people here. I've been speaking to people all week who went to see him lying in state. And for them to know that it meant so much to him meant an extraordinary amount to them. And actually, Cardinal Battista Re, who will preside over the service today, spoke to a local newspaper here today, and he said, "I had never seen him so determined in wanting to go among the pilgrims without knowing it was his last day." And it was Easter, David, the most important time of the year for Catholics. The symbolism is not lost on anyone.
Yeah, it was extraordinary to hear from the Dean of the College of Cardinals right here this morning, talking about those final moments with Pope Francis and how moved he was to witness the Pope so determined to be among the people, even when he wasn't sure his strength was there to handle it. James, the Vatican says Francis, rested after that appearance in St. Peter's Square. He had dinner. He went to bed. We know it was hours later, about 5:30 in the morning, the Pope's health took that turn. About 6:30 in the morning, Francis gestured a farewell hand to that nurse. The Vatican says he suffered a stroke, heart failure, and by 7:30 in the morning, Pope Francis was pronounced dead. But James, you were reporting here for us that extraordinary connection between Pope Francis and his nurse, not only asking him, do I have the strength for this, but then thanking him for taking him back down to that square one last time.
Yeah, the nurse was by his side for many years, David. He meant a lot to him. Massimiliano Strappetti, this is someone who was by his side in the hospital, not just for the 5 weeks that he spent dealing with this double pneumonia in both lungs, but for other visits to the hospital as well. And for Pope Francis, it was important to him, being Pope was it was a great honor, we know that, but he was a simple man, and he responded to these people around him who really lived their lives in acts of service to him. And I think it says so much that it was to his nurse that these words are being reported around the world, not to his senior aides, not to other cardinals, not to the kind of mechanisms of state, but to this nurse who dedicated his life to helping Pope Francis. I mean, I think a lot of people were shocked at his death because I think they had imagined perhaps he was getting better, that we had seen him appear with J.D. Vance in that last day as well, meeting other world leaders. The fact that he'd come out on Easter Sunday, I think many people around the world felt, well, we can breathe a sigh of relief. Perhaps the Pope is getting better. Perhaps he's beating this double pneumonia. But no, the opposite was true. Perhaps he felt it was his last few days on earth and he wanted to be there for the pilgrims who had made the trip for Easter Sunday. Perhaps he knew it was going to be his very last Easter and he just wanted to be there. It was this act of service to the very end. This was the man who did not want to stop working. We reported it repeatedly. Doctors kept saying to him, you probably need to rest. And he wouldn't do it. He was a Jesuit. This was a man who, it was in his soul, it was in his spirit. He was a soldier of God. Jesuits believe in going out into the world to preach the gospel, yes, but to lead by example, not with kind of violence or force, but with leading by example. And that's who he was until the very end, a soldier of God, David.
James, we're looking at the extraordinary pictures coming in live from St. Peter's Square. We're also right here at the Vatican with you on the air for those back in the U.S. getting up early with us this morning. A beautiful, glorious morning here in Rome and at the Vatican. You can see a clear blue sky, the backdrop for so many people who come here to the Vatican from all over the world to pay their respects. So many of them are of the Catholic faith. But you also see when you look out into the crowd and you talk to the people here, as we have now for days, that so many were touched by Pope Francis, people who aren't Catholic, who still felt it was important to come here and pay their respects to a man who led by example when it comes to humility and modesty. Deborah Roberts, my 2020 co-anchor, also with me here at the Vatican. And Deborah, you and I were both talking about how when you go down and talk to Americans, I was there for the final group of people allowed into the Basilica to pay their respects. And when they came out, they almost didn't have words to talk about how moving it was inside the Basilica. And I know you talked to so many Americans who said they felt they needed to be here too.
Yeah, I did, David. I have to tell you, it's been an extraordinary few days being here. Just having a chance to witness this square and people, this city, people pouring into this city. And as you said, some of them Catholic, some of them not. I met a couple in Florida. The woman said that she was new to the Catholic faith. They had hoped to come here. They had planned a trip to come here with the Pope still alive, hoping they'd come here and celebrate this whole occasion. Of course, it was not the one that they had hoped for, but they were in line. They said they felt they needed to be there. I met others who said they were not of the Catholic faith, but they related to this Pope in some ways because, as James just said, the way he lived his life, a simple life, who cared more about the poor and more about this earth and things that were afflicting this world than maybe necessarily about doctrine. Of course, that caused him problems with some among the Catholic faith, but people related to this Pope, and I was so struck by that. And even this morning, we saw those pictures of people running in to get a place in line. You got the sense that even in death, there is still a calling for a lot of people to be sort of near this Pope, near the place where he spent so much time, and to sort of absorb a little bit of that goodness that he seemed to sprinkle around, that simplicity about life and his fellow man.
And Deborah, I was moved by the number of young people that we actually talked to. There was a young woman getting her master's degree in London who said, I have to be in Rome. She came to Rome as well. She's from Miami, Florida. But she's here at the Vatican today among the thousands paying their respects. Another young woman from Spain with her friend. They're both of them, one from Ohio, one from Texas. Fulbright scholars. We'd love to see young Americans out there studying all over the world. They came to Rome as well, and they were among the final mourners to pay their respects as well. And when they emerged, I asked them, why do you think Pope Francis had such reach beyond the Catholic Church? And one of the young women looked at me, Deborah, and said, it's quite simple. When you preach love and you love everyone, people feel it.
Yeah, I heard that too. I heard that from a lot of people. The idea that he was all about the poor, demonstrating, washing the feet of, people in incarcerated, women, wanting to elevate women. This Pope elevated more women than any other Pope before him. And I think those are the messages that young people received from him, that this was a man who was really all about humanity in a way that felt very modern and very current, even though, he was serving in a very traditional role in a lot of ways. And I think that was something, whether they were Catholic or not, he spoke to people like that. Even on social media, this is a Pope who did the first selfie. He didn't participate in social media, but he did a selfie when he came to the United States. I remember seeing pictures of him. So young people saw that this was a man they could relate to. And I think that he will have a lasting impact because of that.
Deborah Roberts with us for our coverage here this morning. Deborah, great to have you by my side. I want to bring in Terry Moran, our chief national correspondent, who's also here. He's covered the Catholic Church for many years for ABC News. And Terry, you were among the many who went into St. Peter's Basilica. Tell us about that moment.
It was a moment of a lifetime in so many ways, to be with these people who needed to be near Pope Francis, because he was a pope who wanted to be near people. The papacy is such an ancient office, such a high office, adorned and draped and sometimes encumbered by tradition, by vestments. And he wanted to shed so much of that to connect. And you could feel that among the people. People were in there moved to tears, as you said. A lot of people also very prayerful, understandably. But I think that the feeling that you got not only inside St. Peter's, but right through the square, was one of gratitude, because this was such a pastoral pope, a pope who reached out to people in that unique way. He was somebody who didn't want all of the trappings of the papacy, and having traveled with him a few times, met him on the plane, where he made a practice of going all around and talking to each and every person on the plane. A little moment kind of where are you, a greeting. You got the sense that this was someone who had a gift for connection. And that was his mission, to make the papacy, this remote high office, so much more informal, bring it down to the people.
Terry, we can hear the bells tolling behind us, and you and I talked since arriving here at the Vatican about how the Pope, tested doctrine, as Deborah said here as well, and tradition, but did so with baby steps, if you will. He talked about climate change. He talked about, obviously, blessings for same-sex couples. He talked about lifting women up into roles that they had not been in within the church. And while he didn't change as much as perhaps some would have hoped, he began the conversation in a way that had not been witnessed in modern times.
I think that's it exactly. This was a pope who leaves a legacy not so much hammered into doctrine and written documents approved by the governance of the church, but really through his own personality, daring from the first moment to bring what he understood to be the message of the Gospels into the modern world. Everyone remembers that first papal trip when he was asked about gay priests, and he said, if a man is looking for God, trying to be close to God, and has goodness in his heart, who am I to judge? That was a shocking thing for many people to hear from the Pope, that they think the Pope is there to judge. And that was a hallmark of how he did try to move the church or engage the church more deeply in what he called an epochal time of change. And he wanted the church not to be so remote from people who are differently situated in their lives for whatever reason. Obviously, the poor, the suffering, the migrants, people in prison. He shocked the church once again. That first Holy Thursday, when the traditional rite of popes and priests to wash the feet, as Jesus did of his apostles, he did it with prisoners, Muslims, and women.
You're so right, Terry. That question, when he said, "Who am I to judge?" that was a signal from very early on that this was going to be a different papacy. You're looking live there at the Vatican. That is French President Emmanuel Macron and the First Lady there moments ago.
Hello from the Vatican. I'm Mike Morrison.
And I'm David Ono. He was the first Latin American pope, the first Jesuit pope, and the first to take the name of Francis.
And before he was pontiff, and for that matter, a priest, he was a janitor and a nightclub bouncer. The man born Jorge Bergoglio certainly did not have the traditional path to the highest seat in the Catholic Church.
But that unorthodox path helped shape many of Francis's views, from speaking out in support of migrants to opening the church to alienated gay Catholics and victims of clergy sexual abuse.
It is also what endears him to the tens of millions of people, which is why we have seen so many gather here at St. Peter's Square over the past few days to pay their final respects. The lines grew so long.
This was a wonderful Pope, and people are really sad.
They snaked out of Vatican City into Rome. Pilgrims from all over the world.
I'm going back to Toronto, tell my son some of the things I've seen here.
Spent hours waiting to say goodbye.
You feel so small being here in the presence of all the people that is gathering from all countries.
To Pope Francis. The Christie family came here on vacation from Red Bank, New Jersey.
We didn't expect this. We booked a Vatican tour for later this week, not knowing, of course, anything like this was going to happen.
A week filled with Italian food and fun.
It's beautiful how everyone is here and everyone's so welcoming and patient with everyone's different emotions.
Ended with a history lesson for their 7th grade son.
Never take anything for granted, and you never know when it could be your last moment.
Inside the basilica, the faithful passed by the Pope's simple wooden coffin. The Archbishop of New York, Timothy Cardinal Dolan, paid his respects.
I bring your intentions with me, folks, and I said on your behalf, I offered some prayers for our beloved Pope Francis.
The coffin was carried into the basilica in a moving procession, an experience now seared into the memory of New York native Madeline Graves, who now returns to class at SUNY New Paltz.
Although I took a few pictures for my grandparents, I tried to stay off my phone and really just be in the moment of my faith as well.
Of course, not everyone can make it here to the Vatican this week to honor the Pope, but many back home have their own personal stories of how Francis touched them. And that includes a restaurant owner in Southern California who was blessed by the Pontiff and received special gifts from him. Jessica DeNova has the story.
Meet Pope Francis is an aura, is something special, is a kindness and love.
Bruno Cerato, owner of the Anaheim White House, talking about this moment at the Vatican. Cerato seen here meeting Pope Francis in 2018, showing him his book, kissing his hand. Cerato telling the Pontiff about his charity, Caterina's Club, named after Cerato's late mother. The nonprofit has given more than 11 million meals to feed children over the last 2 decades.
He packed my shoulder and he said, "Bravo, bravo, keep doing what you do, my child." And he smiled, I kissed his hand, and they gave me a gift.
That's this rosary. It's the second one Cerato received from Pope Francis. The first one was a rosary gifted to the chef on behalf of the Pope. Cerato carries the cross from it around his neck.
Which is just the cross, because the rosary was destroyed in the fire. But there's the cross, then it's been blessed by him.
The flames in 2017 destroying the Anaheim White House. Firefighters finding the damaged rosary buried in the ashes, which Cerato took as a sign to rebuild and continue honoring his parents' memory by feeding those in need.
I feel like that's the DNA of my family, helping the poor. The legacy of Pope Francis is helping the poor. And I got the connection with him when I hear the first time. Then he said, "Never forget the poor."
A man blessed to be in Pope Francis's presence more than once. You saw him 4 times.
I saw him 4 times.
Always looking for ways to help the less fortunate.
I asked the people to give me $5 for the children just to touch my left shoulder.
He's happy Pope Francis is no longer suffering, praying change in the Catholic Church continues. Chef Bruno invites anyone interested in seeing or holding the cross gifted to him by Pope Francis to just ask. He says he'd be more than happy to share it with you. He's at the Anaheim White House Wednesday through Sunday. Reporting in Huntington Beach, Jessica DeNova, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
From one restaurateur to another, back in 2015, Pope Francis visited the United States, traveling to Washington, Philadelphia, and in New York. And during his time in New York, he wanted food from his homeland. So the owner of an Argentinian restaurant in Manhattan had a simple yet unique mission: cook for the Pope and his entourage. Lucy Yang has his story.
This Argentinian restaurant called Buenos Aires in the East Village has fed many celebrities. But one special guest the owner will never forget, Pope Francis.
I wasn't nervous. I was very emotional, you know what I mean? Because I couldn't believe it. It was like a surrealistic movie.
It was September of 2015. The Pope was coming to New York and Ismael Alba was selected to cook one of his meals. Both men hail from Argentina, but home cooking would not be that easy. The chef was told no salt on the chicken because of the Pontiff's health.
But food doesn't taste good without salt.
Well, they said no salt.
How did you?
Lemon, a lot of lemon. We put garlic, we put parsley, we put other things.
And it still tasted good?
Excellent, yes.
The lunch for more than 24 guests was prepared and served on the Upper East Side where the Pope was staying. Afterwards, the Pontiff complimented Ismael, his wife, his mother-in-law, and his helper, and gave them rosaries.
He's a saint, even at that time. This goes up and down.
Just to facilitate that one lunch, they had to fabricate and deliver to the Upper East Side a brand new grill. Also on the menu that day, empanadas and bread pudding for dessert.
They now call this the Holy Grill. Only one meal was ever made on this: chicken for Pope Francis. The owner's hoping someone will appreciate this piece and buy it, then send all the money to charities in Argentina, which the late Pontiff supported.
The Pope was a very humble, very simple man, very charismatic, very sweet.
Pope Francis devoted so much of his papacy to remembering the poor and the marginalized. It seems fitting that the Holy Grill from his lunch would somehow continue his legacy. In the East Village, Lucy Yang, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
From cuisine to culture. Pope Francis never forgot his roots, and in Latin communities across the U.S., he was so much more than a spiritual leader. Karen Jordan visited a neighborhood in suburban Chicago where Catholics honored the Pope and the work he did.
Pope Francis, the Catholic Church's first Latin American pope, made compassion for migrants and marginalized people the foundation of his papacy. That message resonating with parishioners here at the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe. A powerful symbol of Mexican identity, Pope Francis last year encouraged the continued devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, further endearing him to Latino Catholics.
We knew he could relate to our needs, to our suffering, to the poor people, what they go through.
Pope Francis is being remembered for calling for the compassionate treatment of migrants, an issue personal to the Pope, who was born to Italian immigrants in Argentina.
So he's very sensitive to issues of refugees. He's very sensitive to the immigration issue, primarily because that's his life.
Many of the Pope's foreign visits included time spent with refugees fleeing their homelands and often clashed with world leaders who sought to limit the flow of migrants across their borders.
He's trying to say you're dealing with people, don't blame the poor for the decisions of the leaders.
Meantime, the faithful are reflecting on his legacy and wondering what the next papacy will bring.
I saw people were getting closer to God. People were, because of him, I feel like people were more connecting.
He was a very forward-thinking pope, and I hope to see someone like him.
We are just getting started here on this special presentation. Coming up, the Pope in pop culture. We'll look at the magazine covers that he graced, his viral messages on social media, and the movies he also inspired.
Plus, who will be the next Pope? ABC's Terry Moran joins us to discuss the upcoming conclave and the contenders to be Francis's successor.
And later, we know children have always had a special place in Pope Francis's heart. So we'll revisit the babies he blessed and kissed in Philadelphia 10 years ago. We'll be right back.
The passing of Pope Francis.
I think you should gather up the Cardinal's notes.
With art imitating life, and now life imitating art.
Our new Holy Father will make a much better Pope than I would ever have done.
As a new Pope will be selected to replace Pope Francis. But long before Conclave made headlines for its look at the secret inner workings of the papacy, Pope Francis was already making plenty of pop culture headlines of his own. He was named Time magazine's Person of the Year in 2013, before gracing the cover of Rolling Stone magazine in 2014. In 2016, Pope Francis became the first to join Instagram with a simple request writing, "Pray for me." That post delivering 1 million followers faster than anyone had before him.
Los grandes eventos deportivos como el Super Bowl.
The Pope then making history again by delivering a special opening message for the 51st Super Bowl in 2017. His own life story even inspiring the 2019 biographical film The Two Popes, which explored his humility, humanity, and a hope for a changing, evolving Catholic Church into the 21st century.
The right person. Church needs to change, and you could be that change.
That was Lara Spencer reporting. Well, the movie Conclave got so much buzz, it got Oscar nominations. What about here in real life?
It is a great movie, but is it accurate? So we talked to Terry Moran about that, as well as the real conclave that's going to be coming up after this news.
In secrecy, with the world watching, thousands gather in St. Peter's Square, waiting for that white smoke, heralding the election of a new pope.
Extra omnes.
Behind the closed doors of the Sistine Chapel, known as a conclave, the mysterious conference captivating Hollywood.
We're about to choose the most famous man in the world.
And the world. After Pope Francis is laid to rest, the process to replace him will begin.
After they have an opening mass, they meet in the Sistine Chapel. They have generally 2 votes in the morning, 2 votes in the afternoon, until they reach a 2/3 majority and know that at that point they've elected a pope.
It could take days before that white smoke fills the sky over Vatican City, signaling a new head of the Catholic Church has been selected. 252 cardinals will descend upon Vatican City to vote. They must be under 80 years old. In this conclave, there will be 135 eligible cardinals. 108 of them were appointed by Pope Francis.
He appointed the vast majority of this body of cardinal electors. That doesn't mean, however, that he has appointed people of a similar mindset.
When a two-thirds majority is reached, the voting process will conclude. While there's no way to know who will eventually lead the church, some of the cardinals being considered: 70-year-old Cardinal Pietro Parolin from Italy, the Vatican's Secretary of State since 2013. 67-year-old Cardinal Luis Tagle from the Philippines, who has led the missionary office and could become the first Asian pope. And 72-year-old Archbishop of Budapest, Peter Erdo, who twice served as the head of council for European Episcopal conferences.
We're going to get another pope who is invested in the full panoply of Catholic teachings, but who might have particular emphases that he thinks are necessary because of the times we live in.
We're here now with ABC's Terry Moran. And Terry, as we look forward now with what is going to happen with the conclave, what do you expect to play out? Because we know this is the most diverse group of cardinals that we have seen.
Yeah, that's huge. Pope Francis named cardinals from places around the world that had never had a cardinal, never had that kind of attention from Rome, and it will change the dynamic in the conclave.